Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going back in time, back to 1917, to a quiet English village, Cottingley.
Cuttingly.
Cottingley, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
imagine this, World War I, right? The
yeah.
world's kind of in turmoil. Everyone's longing for a little bit of hope. And then, boom, two young cousins, Elsie and Frances.
Delphine France.
They come forward with photographs, and these pictures, they seem to show real fairies dancing in their backyard.
It really is remarkable how these images, just taken by children with a simple camera, just completely captured the world's imagination. And it was such a turbulent time. It's particularly striking, I think, because it really taps into this fascination that we all have, with the unexplained and the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit of magic just beyond our everyday perception.
Right. Yeah. And so, okay, so we have these photographs, these 5 photographs, and that's our primary source material for this deep dive.
Right.
And each photograph is a different scene of fairies interacting with Elsie and Frances.
Yeah.
So can you kind of walk us through these images? Let's start with that very first photo that really set this whole thing in motion.
Sure. So the first photograph was taken in 1917, and it shows Frances standing amidst foliage with 4 fairies seemingly dancing in front of her. And they're these very delicate winged figures, almost like paper cutouts, and there's a very whimsical quality to them, very ethereal.
Okay.
And this image, while striking, it sparked skepticism right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Some people argue that the fairies looked too flat, almost too staged.
Interesting. Okay. And this is where the context of the time becomes really, really important.
Absolutely.
You mentioned the world was in turmoil.
Yes.
What was it about this specific period that made people so open to the idea of fairies, or even just, the supernatural in general?
Well, I mean, think about it. The world was in the midst of this devastating war. Millions of people had perished. And there was just this profound sense of loss and uncertainty. People were really yearning for something hopeful, for something to believe in, something beyond just the grim realities of war.
So almost like a form of escapism.
Yeah, exactly.
Just this glimpse into a world that's untouched by all that, by all the conflict.
Precisely. And this yearning to connect with something beyond the material world was really fueled by the rise of spiritualism, which gained immense popularity during this period.
Spiritualism. Okay. Now, for those of us who might not be super familiar with that movement, can you just give us a quick rundown of what that's all about?
Sure. In a nutshell, spiritualism is the belief that the spirits of the dead can communicate with the living.
Okay.
And this communication could take various forms, from seances and automatic writing to, and this is really interesting, spirit photography.
Your photography. Okay, now that sounds intriguing. What is that? How did that work?
Well, it was essentially a form of photographic trickery, and they would use double exposures to create these images of ghostly apparitions alongside living subjects. And this practice became incredibly popular, especially among those who had lost loved ones in the war and were just desperate to reconnect with them somehow.
Wow, so that's really interesting how, again, technology and this belief system are intersecting.
Yes.
It's almost like at this time, people are already using new technology like the telegraphs and the telephone
Right.
to communicate across these vast distances. So the idea of using photography to potentially connect with the spirit world, it probably didn't seem so far-fetched at the time.
It's a fascinating parallel. And, this fascination with spiritualism wasn't confined to the fringes of society.
Mm-hmm.
Even prominent figures like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, became ardent believers.
Right, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah.
Now, he was utterly convinced of the authenticity of these Cottingley Fairies photos.
He was.
And he even wrote a book about it, The Coming of the Fairies.
Yes.
And in it, he argued that the fairies represented like this higher form of evolution.
Yeah.
But what was it about these photographs that would make someone like Conan Doyle, someone so sharp, a master of logic and deduction, what would make him believe that they were genuinely real?
Well, Conan Doyle, like many others at the time, had experienced personal loss. His son Kingsley died during the 1918 influenza pandemic, and this tragedy really deepened his interest in spiritualism. He was already, predisposed to believing in the possibility of a world beyond our senses, and these photographs, they seem to offer concrete evidence of that hidden realm.
So it wasn't just intellectual curiosity for him.
No, not at all.
This is deeply personal. It was fueled by grief and a longing to connect with his son.
Precisely. And let's not forget the girls themselves. Elsie, at 16, was already a skilled artist, and Frances, at 9, possessed this incredible childlike imagination that adults often dismiss. Their youth and their apparent innocence really lent a certain credibility to those photographs.
It's fascinating. It's almost like a perfect storm. a world that's primed for belief, two young girls with a knack for storytelling and these pictures that just tapped into this deep longing for something magical, something beyond the horrors of war. But let's move on to that second photograph, the one featuring Elsie. What's going on in this picture?
Okay, so this one was taken just a few months after the first, and it shows Elsie seated near a stream with a gnome-like fairy perched on her dress. Now, the fairy in this one is quite different from those in the first photograph. It's much stockier, almost mischievous looking, with these pointed ears and this sly grin.
Okay.
Um,
And so this photograph, this kind of fueled the debate even further, right? Because now there are two different images taken at different times, showcasing different types of fairies.
exactly. And this is where we start to see the emergence of two distinct camps. You have those who believed wholeheartedly in the fairy's authenticity,
Right.
and then you have those who were searching for a more rational explanation.
Yeah.
The skeptics argued that the fairies were nothing more than cardboard cutouts, that they were just cleverly staged and photographed.
Okay, so despite all this skepticism that's emerging, the girls maintain their story.
Mm.
And even as the debate surrounding these photographs intensifies, they stick with it. So what was their motivation for keeping up this charade? Was it just a child's prank that just went way too far? Or was there something more to it?
You know, that's a question that has intrigued historians and enthusiasts for decades. Some speculate that the girls simply enjoyed the attention, the notoriety that came with being the fairy photographers. Others believe that they truly believed in their creations, that they had tapped into something magical, even if it was just a product of their own imaginations.
It's a fascinating puzzle, and one that we're going to keep digging into as we delve into the remaining three photographs and the girl's eventual confession. But before we do that, I really want to take a closer look at the cultural and technological landscape that kind of allowed the Cottingley fairies to capture the world's imagination the way that they did.
It really is a story that goes far beyond a simple hoax. It's a window into a time when the lines between belief and skepticism, science and the supernatural, were blurred in ways that still resonate with us today.
Absolutely. And we'll be right back after a quick break.
Sounds good.
So those first two Cottingley fairies photographs, they really set the stage.
They did.
But the story doesn't just end there. 2 years later, 1919, Elsie and Francis produce three more photographs.
Right.
They're just adding fuel to this fire,
Absolutely.
this debate that's raging on.
Right.
So what about these later images? What can you tell us about them?
Well, these later photographs are really interesting because they showcase a clear evolution, not only in the girls' techniques, but also in the fairies' appearances. The fairies become much more elaborate, more detailed, almost as if they're evolving alongside this growing public interest in them.
Oh, so they're paying attention to the feedback and the skepticism.
It seems that way.
And they're maybe even using it to refine their creations.
Yeah, potentially.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, for example, the third photograph, it depicts a single fairy in mid-flight, and its wings are outstretched as it hovers above a patch of flowers. And the level of detail in the wings is remarkable. You can see the intricate venation, this delicate, almost translucent texture. It's a far cry from the somewhat flat, paper doll-like fairies from that first photograph.
Yeah, it's almost like they're directly responding to the criticism that, oh, those fairies look too artificial, they look too two-dimensional, so they're up in their game.
They're getting better.
Yeah, exactly.
And this attention to detail, it extends to that fourth photograph as well. This one shows Elsie gazing down at a fairy who appears to be offering her a miniature bouquet of flowers.
Hello.
And the fairy in this image is dressed in this flowing gown, almost reminiscent of the fashion of the time,
Oh, really?
which further blurs the line between the human and fairy world.
Yeah, and this is what I find so captivating about this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's not just about the photographs in isolation. It's about the interplay between belief and imagination, and the cultural context in which these images are created and received.
Right.
And these fairies, they might not be real in the literal sense,
Right.
but they really reflect the anxieties, the desires, and even the aesthetics of the time.
You've hit the nail on the head. The Cottingley fairies, they became this kind of cultural mirror.
Wow.
Reflecting back the hopes and fears of a society that's grappling with the aftermath of war and all of these rapid technological advancements that are happening.
Okay, so we got those four photos,
Yeah.
but then there's that fifth and final photograph.
Right.
And this one sparked perhaps the most speculation and debate.
Yes.
It's different from the others because it doesn't actually feature Elsie or Francis.
Right.
It's just this group of fairies bathed in sunlight, seemingly having this leisurely afternoon in a meadow.
Right.
So what makes this one so unique? Why has it continued to intrigue people even after the girls confess to faking the others?
Well, this photograph is fascinating for a couple of reasons. First, it's by far the most aesthetically accomplished of all 5 photographs. The fairies are just so seamlessly integrated into that natural landscape, their forms blending with the grass and the flowers, and it creates this sense of effortless authenticity.
Yeah.
Second, the absence of the girls just adds this element of mystery. It's as if the fairies are finally revealing themselves, no longer needing human intermediaries to validate their existence.
And this ambiguity, this sense of something just beyond our grasp.
Right.
That's really what fuels this enduring fascination
Absolutely.
with the Cottingley fairies, right?
Yeah.
Even today, all these years later, people still debate the authenticity of that 5th photograph, just clinging to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, there was a grain of truth amidst the fabrication.
It's a really good point, and it speaks to this deep-seated desire we have to believe in the extraordinary, in the possibility that magic might still exist, even in a world that's increasingly defined by, reason and scientific explanation. But I think we should also take a moment to consider the role of technology in this whole story.
Yeah.
Because just as photography played a key role in the rise of spiritualism, enabling people to capture these ghostly apparitions,
Right.
it also played a crucial role in disseminating the Cottingley fairies' images,
Of course.
propelling them into, the global consciousness.
Right. The photographs couldn't have gone viral, so to speak, without the technology to reproduce and distribute them widely.
Exactly.
That's a really good point. Technology, often seen as kind of the antithesis of magic. Actually, in this case, it's being used as a powerful tool for shaping beliefs and perpetuating these myths. But speaking of belief, we can't talk about the Cottingley fairies without addressing the elephant in the room, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Right.
His involvement really just adds a whole other layer of complexity to this already fascinating tale. I mean, here's a man, he's renowned for his logic, he's the creator of the ultimate rational detective, Sherlock Holmes, and yet he just falls headfirst into this fairy belief.
Yeah, it's a testament to the power of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
This tendency we all have to seek out information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, even if those beliefs are based on, flimsy evidence.
And in Conan Doyle's case, this was likely amplified by his grief and his growing fascination with spiritualism.
Exactly.
He was primed to believe, and the Cottingley fairies provided him with the proof that he was craving.
Precisely. He saw what he wanted to see,
Yeah.
and he used his intellect and influence to convince others to see it, too. But, let's not judge him too harshly.
Right.
Because his belief, however misguided, stemmed from a very human desire for meaning, for connection with something beyond the material world.
And in a way, isn't that what still draws us to the Cottingley fairies today?
I think so.
It's not just about fairies or hoaxes.
Right.
It's about our enduring need for wonder.
It's for a sense of enchantment, for a reminder that maybe, just maybe, there's more to life than meets the eye.
You've put it beautifully. The Cottingley fairies, while ultimately a product of childhood imagination and clever trickery,
Right.
they tap into something deep within us. A yearning for the magical, a longing for a world where anything is possible. And that's a pretty powerful and enduring legacy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. But what about the girls themselves? They maintained their silence for decades, even after Conan Doyle died, and public interest in the fairies kind of waned.
It did.
So what was it that finally prompted them to come clean about this elaborate hoax?
Well, the truth finally came out in the 1980s when Elsie and Francis, now elderly women, decided to reveal their secret. They explained how they used cardboard cutouts, hat pins, and Elsie's artistic talents to create those fairy illusions.
Oh, wow.
And they described it as a harmless prank,
Okay.
something they had concocted to amuse their family and escape, the boredom of rural life.
So almost like a sense of responsibility.
Yeah, I think so. Like, we need to set the record straight before it's too late,
Right.
before the secret dies with us. But their confession raises more questions, like, why did they wait so long?
Yeah.
And what motivated them in the first place?
Those are good questions, and they're questions that historians and psychologists are still pondering today. Some believe that the girls simply enjoyed the attention, the notoriety that came with being the fairy photographers. Others suggest that they might have initially believed in their creations, that they had tapped into something magical even if it was a product of their own imaginations. But whatever their motivations, their story continues to captivate us. And I think it reminds us that even the most elaborate hoaxes can reveal these profound truths about human nature, our capacity for belief, and this enduring desire for enchantment.
And there's one final twist,
Oh,
one
yes.
detail that adds yet another layer of intrigue.
Right.
Even in her confession, Frances maintained that the fifth photograph,
Yeah.
the one without the girls, was genuine. She insisted that the fairies had appeared in that meadow, bathing in the sunlight. So was it a final act of mischief? Was this a playful wink to a world that had been so captivated by their creations? Or did she truly believe, even after all those years, that she had seen something magical, something beyond, you know, the realm of human comprehension?
It's a tantalizing question, and it's one that we'll explore further as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the Cottingley
Yeah,
fairies.
it's like even after they confess, there's still this big question mark hanging over that final photograph.
There he is.
Did Frances really believe, or was she just kind of messing with everybody?
Right. It's a mystery that we may never truly solve.
Yeah.
And maybe that's part of what makes this story so enduring. It reminds us that sometimes it's okay to just embrace the unknown and allow ourselves to be, captivated by a good story, even if we can't definitively prove or disprove its authenticity.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've looked at the photos themselves,
Yes.
the historical context, the rise of spiritualism, the influence of figures like Conan Doyle,
Right.
even the girl's eventual confession.
Right.
But now, kind of taking a step back, what does it all mean? Why are we still talking about the Cottingley fairies all these years later?
Yeah.
What is it about this story that continues to resonate with us in the 21st century?
Well, I think it speaks to this very fundamental human need for wonder, for enchantment, for a belief in something beyond the mundane realities of everyday life. In a world that's so often defined by logic and reason and scientific explanation, we crave a little bit of magic, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the universe than meets the eye.
It's like this yearning for fairies is also a reflection of our own desire for a world where anything is possible.
Exactly.
Where imagination and belief can actually shape reality.
And it's not just about fairies either. I mean, think about all the modern fairies that we have today, UFOs, Bigfoot, conspiracy theories. These beliefs, whether they're, grounded in reality or not, they fulfill a very similar need.
Yeah.
This need to believe in something extraordinary, something that challenges our understanding of the world.
I like that, modern fairies.
Yeah.
It's true. It's like these stories, they give us this glimpse into the unknown and they help us cope with the uncertainties of life.
They do.
They offer hope, a reminder that maybe there are these forces at play that we can't even comprehend them.
Right, exactly.
And that maybe not everything can be explained away by science.
Exactly.
And you know what? A little mystery makes life a lot more interesting.
I agree.
Keeps us curious, keeps us asking questions.
Absolutely. The Cottingley fairies, they remind us that it's okay to embrace the unknown.
Yeah.
To allow ourselves to be captivated by a good story and to never lose that childlike sense of wonder.
But in an age of digital manipulation and instant information,
Right.
Where the lines between truth and fiction are so blurred, how do we cultivate that healthy skepticism without losing that sense of wonder, that openness to the possibility of something extraordinary?
That's a great question. And it's a delicate balance,
It is.
We need to be critical thinkers. We need to question what we see and hear to be aware of our own biases and the ways that our beliefs can really shape our perceptions.
Of course.
But, at the same time, we don't want to let skepticism completely extinguish that flame of curiosity, that joy of exploring the unknown.
Right. So I guess what we're saying is it's okay to believe, to wonder, to question.
Absolutely.
It's okay to be captivated by a good story, even if you know that it might not be entirely true.
Right.
Because sometimes the most important truths are not in the fact themselves,
Yes.
but rather in the stories we tell about them and how those stories shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us.
Beautifully said. And you never know. Maybe there is a little fairy magic out there just waiting to be discovered.
Maybe, yeah. Well, thanks for joining us on this journey
It's been a pleasure.
back in time to the world of the Cottingley fairies.
Right.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive. We'll see you next time.